The broadcast is now starting.
So Global, we started from a conventional IT services and professional managed services in 2010 across Cisco and Avaya platforms. We have a range of experience with technologies and IT infrastructure management, Cisco Unified Comms, routing and switching, storage, cloud, and cloud platforms. We do have a range of small, large, and medium enterprise, with Fortune 500 companies, multinational financial services, and also in the oil and gas, gases majors in the APAC region. We are headquartered in Adelaide, and we have offices across Australia, Melbourne, Sydney, Perth, Auckland, and in the Asia-Pac region, in Hong Kong, Singapore, India, and Malaysia, with over 200 staff. We're adopting AI blockchain technologies to assist MSP and other enterprises to address conventional IT operations and the evolution into the modern IT services from conventional IT operations. So now I'm going to ask our colleague Nav to take it over, and he will take you to the Windows Virtual Desktop. Nav?
Sorry, John. John, do you want to get back to the panel introductions once more? I think we had a bit of a startup issue, so if you can just go back to the panel introduction. I think we missed that in the broadcast.
Okay. On the panel we have today, we have Abhilash, Rakesh, and Selvam, who look after operations for the ANZ region. Myself, John, and Grant look after sales for the ANZ region. And we also have Nav and Raj from TwoCumulus, who's going to discuss with you a bit more about Windows Virtual Desktop. Over to you, Nav.
Hey, hello all. Thank you for joining. My name is Nav. I'm from TwoCumulus Technology Solutions. So we are a solution provider with the expertise in cloud. So we work on AWS and Azure. We work with our customers across the globe with solutioning, IT transformation, and migration services, right? So we're going to be discussing about desktop virtualization, right? So with the global crisis around, most of the organizations today are looking for a productive, secure, and efficient desktop virtualization platforms, right? So while there are already desktop platforms available like Citrix, VMware Horizon, Microsoft has come up recently with a Windows virtual desktops in Azure, which integrates pretty well with all the Office 365 tools and provides a really good end user experience for the customers, right? So before we get into the deployment and the benefits of it, let's first talk about the use cases. So why would a company need a desktop virtualization, right? I mean, in today's use case, as a medium to an enterprise company, they already have a VPN-based solution available. So they already have all of these users have a company-provided laptop patched, added to the Active Directory domain, already has an antivirus installed in them, and they have a VPN setup. So users will just have to log in, connect to the network, and access the resources, right? But what happens when one of the hardware goes bad, or when few of the users have to be onboarded, right? Or, I mean, with the current scenario, shipping a hardware to the end user or making the end user coming to office is not a viable solution, right? So that's where virtualization platforms in the cloud has really become hot, right? With solutions like Windows Virtual Desktops provided by Microsoft, we can instantly create virtual desktops, give it to users, and at the same time, make it the most secure solutions that we can offer to our users, right? So we have deployed the solution to our other customers and partners where they wanted to onboard users, where they wanted to scale up, or they wanted to push multiple applications, right? I mean, since the users are not in office, it cannot be pushed globally to all the laptops. Instead, they went for a solution, a cloud-based solution where you can publish the applications and the users can start using it directly without having to install the applications in their laptops or the workstations, right? I mean, those are different scenarios. It's widely used in the financial services, healthcare industry, government, and if a user has their own device, so without compromising the security, we can offer them a virtual desktop and make them productive. As I said, without compromising anything on the security front, there are configurations which restricts user from copying data from the VDI to the desktop or from the desktop to the VDI, right? So these are some of the use cases where these desktop virtualization desktops can be used, right? So we'll talk more about the benefits and how we can deploy it in the real production scenario. So before we get there, how is it done today? So virtualization, desktop virtualization is not new. So it's been around for a while. There are many vendors or many players in the market who offers this solution. But if we talk about Windows, so it's currently done with RDS services, Microsoft Remote Desktop Services. So today you can, if you want a multi-session on a machine, it has to be a server operating system, right? So you can have a Windows 2012, 16, 19 servers. You can have a terminal server license. You can have multiple users logging into the same machine, right? But if you take a client operating system, it's a one-to-one. So if there is a client operating system, and if we want to share that with multiple users, it's not possible with the existing, I mean, with the current technology, the current licensing. So it has to be a one-to-one mapping, right? But with the Windows Azure desktops, we can have multiple sessions on servers as well as on Windows operating systems, right? And it can be a 2012 and above, or it can be Windows 10 and the latest builds, right? So all we need is the proper licensing. So we need a Microsoft 365 licensing in Windows Virtual Desktop that enables the user to access these virtual desktops, right? And these comes in different images. So if we take Windows 10 images, we can have a Windows 10 base image without a multi-session where it's a one-to-one mapping, or we can have a Windows 10 Enterprise multi-session image where the licensing are incorporated. We can deploy the VM, enable multi-user session so that the users can start accessing the vision machines parallelly, right? And there is also a third, a custom golden image provided by Microsoft, which includes Office 365 Pro Plus. So if you are a Microsoft O365 user, if you're already using O365, and if you have Pro Plus licenses assigned, you may want your users to access the MS Office tools, right? I mean, these images comes pre-built with those tools, and we just have to deploy and start using them. So instead of the traditional way where we want to build this infrastructure and start giving it to users, it usually takes from weeks to months. But with Azure WVD, it takes 30 minutes to 1 hour to set up, to provision the entire environment and for users to start working on it, right? And it's highly scalable and available. All right, so let's talk about few of the virtual desktop benefits. So as I said, having a multi-session on Windows 10 is definitely one of the benefits that we get out of WVD, and it's optimized for Office 365 Pro Plus applications, right? And not just Windows 10, it also supports server operating system starting 2012 R2, right? And while giving desktops, it can also publish your applications. So there are two different virtualizations that you can do with Windows virtual desktops. So either we can give a full desktop to the user, where the user just logs in as if it's any other virtual desktop. They can do their regular work. They can install applications. They can access anything. So it's as if they're accessing a desktop within the network. Or you can publish an application. Let's take an Outlook, for example. So there are users on the field or outside the network. They don't need access to the network to access the Outlook, right? They just need Outlook. But for them to install the Outlook, there is a licensing requirement, or the base machine which accesses the email, it needs an Outlook app installed. So with virtual desktops, applications like Outlook or any other application, when we publish it, these applications can be accessed over a browser, or it can be pinned to your start menu. So what it means, next time when you want to access any application with the Windows virtual desktops, just click the app. It opens up the app. It can be Outlook, it can be any other application. It need not be installed in your local hard disk. There are no data stored in your local hard disk. It opens up the application. It serves the purpose, and when it closes, nothing is saved locally. Everything is saved in your server. So that way, the data is protected while the application is serving the users, right? And the next major benefit is the Windows 7. So as we all know, Windows 7 is obsolete. Microsoft doesn't support it anymore. We'll not be able to procure the Windows 7 licenses, right? But if there is still a need, or if your organization is still using Windows 7 on-prem, we can still provision Windows 7 virtual desktops in Azure, right? Microsoft allows us to do it with a 3-year free extended security updates. But there are some limitations to it. We'll talk about it in a minute, right? And as I said, it does have some licensing requirements, right? When a user has to be a part of M365, and when they are part of M365, they are also entitled for different security features within Microsoft O365, like your Intune's ATP, AIP. So these are some of the virtual desktop benefits. And let's talk more about the supported operating systems. So Windows 10 multi-session, Windows 10 single session, Windows 7 with an extended support, and any server operating system above 2012 R2 are the supported operating systems in the Azure WVD, right? So before we get into the deployment, right, we want to talk a little bit about the architecture. So in a typical on-prem scenario, if I have to set up a virtual desktop environment, so we'll be putting a farm together, a group of servers enabled with an RDS role enabled, and one of them will be acting as a gateway server. One of them will be holding the web access role, and while the other does the resource brokering and load balancing. If you have had to manage that in the past, you will know it is complex and it is expensive, right? So what Microsoft has done with WVD is they have converted that web access, gateway, resource brokering, and load balancing into a PaaS, a platform as a service solution. So Microsoft converted that into a PaaS and manages it themselves. So as an end user or as a customer, we use the PaaS service, a WVD service from Microsoft. It is offered to us for free. We will not be charged for using the PaaS service, right? While they manage the engine, we manage the host that we are putting on top of this engine. So we'll be putting a group of virtual machines or set of virtual machines. On top of that, we create multiple sessions, right? We get to decide what would be the size of those virtual machines, what would be the operating system, right? What would be the compute, what would be the RAM? Are we going to expose it a full desktop? Are we going to expose just an app? Right? That is still under our control. And the availability of those VMs, that's part of Azure's SLA, right? Microsoft manages that. The compute, storage, and the network, Microsoft manages that. So these are the three different components, and let's take a look at a bit detailed architecture of the Windows virtual desktops, right? So as I said, the middle component is the core services. We call them core service. So it involves web access roles, RDS gateway roles, resource broker role, and a database. So it's usually a flat database with the RDS. Here they're using an Azure SQL database. That's again a PaaS component managed by Microsoft, right? So the RDS client at the left-hand side is customer managed. So it can be your mobile phone, it can be a tab, it can be a laptop, it can be a workstation, it can be Android, Windows, any operating systems that supports a browser, it can access Windows Virtual Desktop, right? And at the right-hand side, these are the customer managed infrastructure. For the WVD to work or for the WVD to function properly, so we need an Active Directory, we need an Azure AD, we need the VM host pool, and then FSLogix profile file servers. So these are the minimum infrastructure that we will need in Azure for the WVD to function properly, right? So we'll see how the data flows when someone accesses the WVD, right? So let's say I have configured WVD, virtual desktops environment. I've onboarded users. So everything is set. When a user wants to access one of the virtual desktops, so they can either access that with a URL provided by the administrator. They can go to the URL, start typing in their O365 username password, or there is an app they can install in the desktop. Just click that app, it'll open up with a preloaded username password, and that takes you directly to the desktop, right? But either ways, when a request is made, the user is authenticated against the Azure AD. So that's the first step. So once the user is authenticated, they're put to the next phase where they're connected to the web access, and web access goes to the gateway. So the step 2, 3, 4 happens within Microsoft PaaS, right? At the step 5, where the desktop is given to resource broker and the virtual desktop is given directly to the user, right? But as I said, the core functionality is handled by Microsoft. So that's why the solution is highly stable and highly efficient, right? So to deploy the WVD, we do have some prerequisites. So the customer should have a valid Azure subscription. They should have an Azure Active Directory. So Azure AD, if you're part of O365 today, it means you're already having an Azure Active Directory, right? And it needs an Active Directory or Azure AD DS for authentication. And all the users, all the resources or the virtual machines should be part of the same region and the same resource groups. So for an instance, so if your company is hosted, if your company is in Melbourne, and if you're looking to provide virtual desktops for users in the same city, it makes sense to choose a region which is nearby, create the virtual machines in the region nearby and offer it to the users. That will have the least latency. But what if the, the users are spread across different cities and different countries? Then we need to solution this accordingly. We need to have multiple groups or different groups created for the user's nearest region so that the latency is really less and the users are not facing any performance issues, right? And then the credentials. So as part of WVD's deployment, we will need to create few service principals to enable the PaaS services to manage this. And once all these prerequisites are met, we can proceed with installations, right? But just before that, there are some network considerations that needs to be made. So what happens when I have my production environment on-prem? So I don't have anything cloud, but if I provision virtual desktops in Azure, how will the users get access to my production environment on-prem? So there must be a connectivity between your on-prem environment to cloud in that case. It can be an express route, which is a dedicated network, expensive usually. So enterprise companies does that. If they have multiple data centers, the data centers are tied to Azure DCs over an express route connection. But for most of the other customers, most of the other SMB segments, it's a IPsec VPN connectivity. If you have a firewall which supports a VPN and it's part of the compatibility list with Microsoft Azure, we can establish an IPsec connectivity from your on-prem network to Azure. So the Azure will act as a VDI layer. So anybody who wants to connect your network, they get a virtual desktop from the Azure and they carry your network on-prem, perform their operations, and then they go out, right? And the AD has to be synced with Azure because without the AD being synced, the authentication for the Azure WVD will be difficult, will be complicated. There will be multiple user accounts, one for accessing the WVD, one for logging into the desktop itself. So we'll see that in the coming demo, why it is needed to sync your Active Directory with Azure AD, right? So here's a demo. Okay. So there's a question. Do you use VPN to connect remotely? How is your existing environment set? Do you use VPN or are all your apps hosted publicly or over the internet? All right, I hope you all answered. So coming back to the demo, right? So as I said earlier, there are two types of virtualizations we can do with WVD. One is a full desktop. The other one is a app-based virtualization. So what you're looking at in the screen is a full desktop virtualization where an entire desktop is given to the user, right? Let me just play this for you. So there's the first level of authentication where the user users their Office 365 licenses or credentials. It gets validated with Azure AD. Once it is authenticated, it takes them to the second phase. So there you see the remote desktop that's published for that user. So they access the remote desktop and it'll ask you for another permission. This permission is for the machine itself. It's an Active Directory authenticated machine. It's like any other username password that you type in when you log into your laptop. So if the Active Directory is synced to Azure AD, both the credentials will be same. So the one you're using to authenticate WVD and the one you're using to authenticate the VDI, right? They will be same. but it's not mandatory. If the users are okay having different authentications, different user accounts for different needs, it is still possible, right? So now we saw about the full desktop. The next video will show us about the app-based authentication, right? So in this video, we'll not be giving an entire desktop to the user. Instead, we'll just be publishing few applications for the user to log in and access, right? The app can be an Outlook, it can be a Word, it can be an Excel. So just to let you know, these apps are installed on the base machines or the host machines and then hosted or published for the users. So the machine this user is using to access the Excel, they don't have Excel installed or an Outlook installed. They still can access these apps from the WVD portal. They can even pin all these apps to their start menu. So next time they don't even have to go through the entire process. It can be pinned to start menu, and then they can open and access it as if they are installed locally. And along with that, we can integrate OneDrive with these virtual desktops. So as you probably know already, OneDrive, Microsoft OneDrive gives you a 1 terabyte of space for each user, right? So while integrating, we can integrate OneDrive with the VDIs so that it allows the user with more space to store their file. They don't have to store anything locally. So when they're not storing anything locally, it saves you storage cost in Azure, right? We don't need big storage space to store all the user profiles. They just store it in the pre-allocated OneDrive space, which is around 1 terabyte, and that saves a lot of cost for us. All right, so virtualizing, I mean, the previous videos were virtualizing about the guest operating systems, and for the Windows Server operating system, anything above 2012 R2 can be virtualized, and it can be multi-session, but an Office 365 Pro Plus support is only for Windows Server 2016 for now, right? And on the licensing aspect, so we may have, I mean, we had customers in the past, right? I mean, they bought licenses, Windows Server licenses in bulk. So they either had as FLA licenses or they were part of EA agreement. They had licenses in bulk. But if I'm going to host a WVD solution in Azure, and if I'm going to create a group of Windows servers, why would I pay operating system license while I already own them? Yes. So there is a way we can leverage our existing license. It's an Azure hybrid benefit is what Microsoft calls it. So if you already has a license, we can enable that option, make use of the licenses that you have on-prem, and that saves you 30 to 40% of the overall cost for the VMs, right? And there are also other ways where you can save money. We'll see about it. Before getting there, virtualizing Windows 7. So earlier, I said it is possible to virtualize Windows 7, but it has its own limitations, right? But yeah, so with Windows 7, Microsoft provides 3 years of extended support, extended security updates, right? But if somebody has to use a Windows 7 virtual desktop, it can only be a full desktop, right? We cannot install an app and publish with a Windows 7 host. It's not possible. And also Microsoft recommends that this should be the last possible resort before using the Windows 7, because there are other ways where we can overcome these dependencies today. So Microsoft has has acquired a tool called FSLogix. So if you read more about it, it has different functionalities and features which actually helps us overcome the operating system compatibilities, right? We'll see that about it. The next slide. So FSLogix Technologies. So to give you a bit of a background, Microsoft recently acquired this company. So what they do, FSLogix, they had a proprietary solution, right? So they help with storing user profiles. So what they do, they create containers and they store the user profiles in a containers. So why is it efficient, right? In a normal scenario, if a user has a company provided laptop, and if it's a part of AD or even if not a part of the AD, when a user logs into a system, a local user account is created, and whatever user does, it's stored under the user profile. So that's a local profile. And then with AD, we can implement roaming profiles. So those who are used to roaming profiles knows how long it takes for a profile to load when a user is, is a roaming profile user, right? Because when a user is set for roaming profile, the profile is not stored locally, but rather stored at a common location, usually in a file server in a common share. And every time when the user logs in, the profile information is loaded from the remote storage location, and then the user is allowed to log in, which takes time. The login time is more, and anybody who used it in the past will definitely know about it, right? So what FSLogix does here is they still store the profile elsewhere. They're not storing the data locally, but their special proprietary solution tweaks the operating system, see that the profile is stored locally. They keep a cache and store the actual profile elsewhere. So that's what Microsoft combined that solution with WVD to reduce the storage requirement on the virtual groups, and also make the profile loading a lot faster, right? So as part of the WVD deployment, we also create a file server where we deploy this FSLogix solution and store the profiles, right? But there are vendors like NetApp. They offer Azure NetApp files. They can integrate with FSLogix Technologies for the profile sharing. So they provide a high IOPS shares, which is hosted on top of an SSD, right? So a power user who needs a dedicated machine or a machine with instant login, an instant data transfer, we have deployed the solution with Azure NetApp files on an SSD, a premium share for the customer, and it really works well, right? Other than that, there are two other features that this tool has: app masking and Java redirection. Though it is not used much in the WVD, but it's still worth knowing about it, right? So there are scenarios where we have multiple Java versions or multiple applications installed in a host. But when a user logs into the machine, even the user is different, they get to see all the applications installed in it, right? So to avoid that, the only solution was to keep different sets of hosts with different sets of application, right? But with app masking, we can assign which user should or can see what applications installed. Let's say I have 10 apps installed in a base machine and I have 10 users. We can define which users can see what applications, right? So if a user doesn't need to know about the other applications installed about it, we can just mask it. So that's what the app masking does. So there are ways we can configure it for the host, and it is still possible. And Java redirection is nothing but it allows you to run multiple versions of Java on the same machine. And while you're using your application or testing it out, you can choose the version of Java that you want to use. That's another functionality. Though they are not used in WVD much, it's still worth knowing about it, right? And who's eligible for it? So as I said, FSLogix really seems interesting, but will it add more cost? Do I have to shell out more to make use of that? No. So Microsoft added that as part of the WVD solution. So if your users are part of M365 E3, E5 licenses or A3, A5 student use benefits or F1 or 365 businesses, any of these licenses in the screen, you are eligible for WVD and FSLogix part of it, right? Or let's say I don't have these licenses, but I have an RDS Cal license on-prem. Yes. So we can make use of the RDS Cal licenses on-prem and set up the WVD, right? And who can access the FSLogix? The same as before. If you have RDS, if you have a Cal or a SAL license, or if you have an M365 license, or if you have a Windows 10 Enterprise E3, E5, A3, A5, you get access to FSLogix Technologies automatically, right? It includes the containers, O365 and profile containers, app masking, and Java redirection, right? Okay, so how is it priced? How is the Windows Virtual Desktop priced? So as I said, the courses Microsoft doesn't charge, but still the VMs that we are hosting as part of the pools that we create, right? We will still be charged for it. That'll be part of the subscription fees or any data transfer to and fro, right? In and out of the virtual machines will be charged by Microsoft, and obviously the licensing cost. So if you have your own Windows license, you can save 30 to 40% of cost, right? If you don't have one, and we can pick up the Azure reserved instances. So Azure reserved instances, or we get into a contract with Microsoft for a long-term commitment, right? We can choose 1 year to 3 years, which actually saves close to 70% of your monthly cost. If you're going for a VM at a monthly cost, you could potentially save up to 70% with a longer commitment, right? So that's the pricing. So what happens after the deployment? So the prerequisites are met. We have configured WVD on-prem, the users are provisioned. So what happens after that? It's the run and maintenance, right? We may want to scale up, scale down, keep a tab on the running instances, or you might want to install the applications or publish new applications or onboard users, remove users, clean up, health check. So all these are done currently. I mean, we offer this as a service to our customers, right? We monitor the virtual desktop environment. So how many hosts are running? What are the inbound connections? What are the outbound connections? So there are dashboards and reports which gives us the live data. So there are alerting mechanism which triggers alerts, and then a tickets are created automatically. So that's the team who monitors that currently, right? And then as part of the regular health check, proactive and reactive support, the teams are working 24/7 currently to help customers in different time zones, right? So with this, I think we are at the end of this webinar. So if you do have any questions, please post it. We'll be more than happy to address all your queries.
All right, I think we have got a question here. All right, this is about the profile container. So the question is, since there is a cache stored locally and certain regulations within the banking domain that require preservation of each system used by some specific roles within an organization, how it would be addressed here. I could repeat the question. It's about the profile container. Since there is a cache stored locally and certain regulations within banking domain that require preservation of each system used by some specific roles within an organization, how would it be addressed here?
All right. Yep. So it is certainly customizable, right? I mean, caching is for the faster login. So for the export compliance or a data compliance law, if caching is forbidden, so it can be disabled. It won't prolong the user login experience. The user login won't be longer, but still, it definitely will not be as fast as the local copy is stored, right? But as far as the multiple groups within the finance department, last time when we had to do it for one of the partners, we worked with them. There were different departments within the finance section or within the banking section, right? And we created different groups for different departments with different regulations, right? And the one with the most regulation, we almost disabled all the data move, all the caching, and except for, I mean, we even restricted users from taking screenshot or copying anything from VDI to desktop or from the desktop to VDIs, right? But the answer is yes, it is possible, it is customizable, it can be disabled. I hope I answered your question.
All right, any more questions? All right, so the other question I think that we have here is, so can we use Windows Desktop for accessing specific applications such as the Microsoft Outlook, Microsoft Dynamics, etc., or is it limited? Can we limit it to a one application or a set of applications just to be accessed by the VDI?
Right. So as we saw, FSLogix allows us to control that, right? So though the host can have multiple apps installed, we can restrict users from accessing all of them. So if there are specific applications that we want our users to access, we can make necessary changes in the FSLogix that allows them to restrict it.
Hey, Nav.
Hey.
I've got a question regarding the imaging, Nav. So is it only from through marketplace we get the images, or we can custom make our image internally with our IT policies and use that images using the WVD?
Oh yeah, that's a good question, Rakesh. Thanks for that. Yeah, it is possible to bring in the custom images, right? If the company has a golden image which is being used on-prem, we can upload it to Azure and we can spin up machines with that image.
Oh, perfect. So say in this case, somebody has a specific endpoint security in place. So how does that work? It works as normal as our on-prem or desktops, or?
Yeah, it does. I mean, the host pools that we're creating in Azure, they are a private network, and as long as they are part of your on-prem or the production network where it controls the endpoint, it'll be considered as any other machine.
Okay.
So you deploy the endpoint agent and you manage them.
Okay, and I've also got some questions with the Active Directory. How does that work? Say, does it support the reverse syncing, say, from cloud to on-prem? I think
So,
I know it works from on-prem to cloud, but I have a question whether it can reverse sync from cloud to on-prem.
yeah, it does. So an Azure Active Directory, it can be a one-way sync, or it can be a two-way sync too. The changes that you
Oh,
make in the cloud, it can be synced to on-prem.
okay. So we do not require any additional ADA servers connectors.
No, there are some options that you need to enable.
Okay. I
All
think
right,
you
good
answered my
question. Yeah.
questions. Yes, thank you so much.
All right, fantastic. Good question. All right, any more questions?
I think those are the questions for now. Nav, so thank you very much for your time with us today, and all the panelists and all the attendees for sharing your and asking questions and trying to understand the service itself. So please let us know if you've got further questions, as you see here, or you can be in touch with us using our reachability mediums such as LinkedIn or Twitter, or directly from our website, or contacts as given in the website. Thank you very much for everyone's time today, and you'll have your recording available shortly, sent directly to your email and also accessible via all our channels. Thank you, and have a great rest of the day.
All right, thank you all.
Thank you, Nav. It was a great presentation. Thank you all.
All right,
Cheers,
thank
guys.
you all.
Thank you.